What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 18 preview, so I'm going to go through a bunch of questions and topics that you put to me on Twitter and give you my opinion. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. So we've got to talk about the latest Reece James news first of all. Now, according to The Athletic, the injury news is not as bad as first feared. The problem from an FPL point of view is he hopes to be back in 3 to 4 weeks, and as you can see from the fixtures and the game weeks on the right, that means he's going to miss quite a few game weeks because obviously we've got a few quick turnarounds over the kind of Christmas period. So even if it was just 3 weeks from kind of the 1st to the 21st of January, he'd still miss game weeks 18, 19, 20 and 21. And then if it's closer to 4 weeks, he may even miss game week 22 as well. And that's when he hopes to return. That's not a guarantee. And also, just because he's back then and maybe fit, they might reintegrate him into the side a bit slower this time, possibly give him some minutes off the bench. So at that point, it just looks like he's not a player that we can keep in FPL. Now, that doesn't mean you have to sell him straight away. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there kind of saying that they're going to bench him. They're going to use one of their players off the bench. In a lot of cases, that's an Arsenal defender. And then they'll reassess in game weeks 19. Part of the reasoning for that seems to be potential double game week news, which would be great. We've talked before about how, you know, the likes of Brighton and Liverpool, etc., might get a double game week announced that hasn't already happened, but that's not guaranteed. And also, the turnaround time between game weeks 18 and 19 is pretty quick. So if we have a look on the FPL page, the game week 18 deadline is Friday the 30th of December. If you're going to roll the Reece James possible transfer in the hope of getting double game week news by game week 19, well, that's on Monday the 2nd of January. I can't imagine stuff will be released on New Year's Day anyway. So that deadline's around 4 o'clock on the 2nd. So if you can give yourself more time, great, but don't feel like you have to roll the transfer. If you want to get rid of Reece James straight away, then you can absolutely do that, especially in a case where you know which defender you want to buy. You're going to get them in game week 19 anyway. You could just do that in game week 18 instead and save yourself some money, because I'm sure he's going to go down 0.1 million. For what it's worth, I'm probably going to not transfer him out in game week 18, but that's because I'm probably going to focus my transfer on Callum Wilson instead. But either way is perfectly fine, whichever way you want to go about it. In terms of who the best replacements are, I don't know if there's an obvious standout replacement. Now, Trippier, if you don't already own, I didn't even put Trippier on the list because I feel like everybody owns him at this point. If you don't, even though he's not got a double game week, he is a very good long-term option. The Newcastle defence looks good. He's very attacking, but I didn't even bother to put him on the list because I feel like most people who want him already own him. If you're going to be looking towards double game week players where they're already announced, then someone from Chelsea looks like the best bet. We still need to wait and see what the kind of time frame is with Chilwell, but if he's not back in training yet, then Kulusevski could be a good short-term option. Not so sure about the long-term. Obviously, now we know that Reece James is out for probably 3 to 4 weeks. Olspqt could also be a very good short-term option. Chelsea fans, let me know down in the comments below, do you think someone else could play on the right? I know in a wing-back system, there's a few other options that could play there. But if it was a back four, which apparently Chelsea have been training at and trying to use going forward, surely Olspqt is going to play most games there. And he's only 4.8 million. So it'd be interesting to know what you think about him and Kulusevski. But they've obviously got Forest away in 18, double game week in 19, and Crystal Palace at home in game week 20. So you could play your Chelsea defender in all 3 of those games if you wanted to. Obviously, Cancelo is an option. Now, I am recording this before the Man City Leeds game. I'd prefer to wait until afterwards, but I'm just not going to be able to get the video out if I wait. So hopefully he's fine and available. Obviously, he's quite expensive at 7.4 million, but they do have a double game week in game week 20. So he's not a bad option if you can afford it. I've seen some people talking about Perisic. Now, I think it was quite, I don't want to say, amazing's maybe a bit over the top, but I was surprised to see him straight back into the side for Spurs in game week 17. So that is encouraging. And they do have a double game week, and I think sometimes I don't talk about that enough, but it's just such a difficult one. I'm not sure we should massively worry about it. And when Sessegnon is back and available, or fully fit or whatever, like, he could take minutes off Perisic as well. So Villa at home is a pretty good fixture, and he is quite attacking. Like, he's got good attacking numbers. Palace away is okay, but the double game week is so hard. I can't see Spurs keeping a clean sheet in either of those games, but it is Fulham straight after. So I think he's an okay short-term bet at 5.5, but I feel like Chelsea have the fixtures. So it depends whether you want to kind of run the risk of Cucurella or Azpilicueta definitely being nailed on for the time being, or whether you want to go for the minutes risk of Perisic instead, who has better attacking numbers but worse fixtures. I think I would probably side with the Chelsea defender, but if you think that Perisic is going to get regular starts over the next 3 to 4 game weeks, you could definitely go for him instead. People are starting to talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think because they've got money in the bank, and obviously getting rid of Reece James when he was 5.8 million gives you the option of going up to Trent or to Robertson instead. As someone that owned Trent for a lot before the World Cup break, and having watched the Villa game as well, they still look a little bit susceptible at the back to conceding chances. We saw Villa obviously score. They could have had another goal as well. I'm just not so sure about it. I mean, his attacking numbers are still very good. Like 0.22 expected assists, 0.09 expected goals. Extremely good, right? Not maybe as good as he's been in the past, but still a lot better than a lot of other defenders we'd be looking at. But 7.2 million just feels like a lot of money. Like, the fixtures are pretty good, but I think a few times they've got to go away, right? It's away to Brentford, away to Brighton. Chelsea at home is not necessarily great. Leicester at home's okay. Wolves away, Everton at home. They're all right fixtures. So it's not that they're like really, really bad or anything like that, but for 7.2 million for a defence I'm not sure I trust, I feel like you're relying on the attacking returns maybe a little bit too much. If they get a double game week in 21 confirmed, maybe then that would look a little bit better, but I'm not sure he's someone that I'd want to go for right now. If you're not already tripled up on Arsenal, then an Arsenal defender always looks pretty good. Gabriel, if you've got the cash, Ben White otherwise. And with Dunk at 4.7 million, I think I would avoid him unless you knew there was a double game week, because there's not a huge amount of fixtures for Brighton that I would definitely want to play him in kind of in the short term. Like Arsenal at home, not great. Everton away is okay, but it's an away game. Then you've got Liverpool at home. That's difficult to keep a clean sheet. Leicester away. I think 22 onwards, even without a double, Brighton look okay. But unless they get that double in 21 confirmed, I don't think I'd want to bring Duncan right now. The only other defender I think I've not put up that I've seen people talk about is possibly Cresswell, who's only 4.8 million. Pretty good short-term fixtures. Brentford at home, Leeds away, Wolves away, Everton at home. Next 4 are pretty decent for a team that's done quite well. But I think they have got a few injuries right now. Zuma's still flagged, so is Aguard. I've probably pronounced that wrong, haven't I? I just think for 4.8 million, I'd probably rather take a bit of a risk on Azpilicueta or Cucurella and just get that double game week instead. So that's probably why I would avoid Cresswell for now. So with Reece James, just to come back to kind of the original thing, there's no massive rush to get rid of him this week as long as you can eat that 0.1 million that he'll probably drop. Obviously, you can check your own team value, how that might affect future transfers and stuff like that. But if you want to get rid of him, you can. I just don't think there's necessarily a standout option. Obviously, for Man City, I talked about Cancelo. Stones, Laporte might be options, but you can't necessarily guarantee as many minutes from them. So it's going to be, I don't know, there's no standout, but there's lots of different ways you could go. And obviously, keep an eye on what future midfield or forward moves you might want to make, because if you're going to need extra money to upgrade a player, it might be worth coming down a little bit in price from Reece James. So let me know down in the comments below, who are you replacing with him? Are you doing it this week or are you doing it in game week 19? Alright, so Spurs, what do we do with players like Kulusevski? Spurs don't seem to be gelling, and it's hard to justify them over Saka, Martinelli and other in-form players. So I heard an interesting stat from the commentators on the Spurs-Brentford game the other day, that is the 9th game in a row that Spurs have conceded first, which isn't necessarily great if you're looking at a defender like Perisic, but obviously we're talking more specifically about Kulusevski. They are at least coming back and scoring goals, and he does have pretty good minutes right now, especially when Richarlison is out injured. I think for other attackers, not many people really own Son at the moment, and if you've got Kane, you're probably quite happy with him. Another game, another goal. He's been super consistent so far this season. It can be frustrating when, you know, you have unlimited transfers, you decide to go Kulusevski instead of like a Saka, like a Mount, etc., and he's the one that blanks. Obviously, I've not seen Foden play yet. We'll see what he ends up doing, but it's only one game, right? I always try and think of it as you chose Kulusevski for a reason. What has changed? If one game against Brentford has changed your mind, it might be worth giving them at least one more game just to see what happens, especially remembering that he does have a double game week as well. And I think given the date that is going to happen, so if we come on to Kulusevski here, the double game week is 15th and 19th of January. I don't think Richarlison's going to be back by then. And I think Villa at home is a perfectly reasonable fixture to give him and give you some more thinking time. So if I had Kulusevski and I was thinking of going to Saka, who's obviously got Brighton, Mason Mount, Nottingham Forest, and a double game week, possibly Foden, I think I'd give Kulusevski at least one more game and roll the transfer instead of knee-jerking a little bit. Now, for what it's worth, and I did say this before the deadline for game week 17, I do think, given the fixtures and the double game weeks that Chelsea have, that Mount is a better option. I think Saka's a better option as well, especially when you couple the minutes that he gets plus penalties. And Foden will have to wait and see. If he starts and he looks like he's going to continue to start, he could be a better option. But Mount and Saka in particular, I do really like. But obviously, the longer you leave it to make that change, the less kind of valuable it is, because Kulusevski's got a double coming as well. And over the next 3 game weeks, 18, 19 and 20, he'll play the same number of fixtures as Mason Mount, for example, although the fixtures aren't necessarily quite as good, because Arsenal at home and Man City away is about as tough as it's going to get for Spurs. So if I was a Kulusevski owner, I wouldn't be... I don't think you should necessarily be stubborn and correct a mistake. I just think it's too early right now to say that it was a mistake to go for him. So I would give him the Aston Villa game and then I would reassess. See if Spurs can do a little bit better. But I thought he looked alright against Brentford. I know they've got this tendency right now to start slow, go behind and have to come back. But if they can rectify that soon, they are still scoring goals. And Kulusevski will get good minutes with Richarlison out and he could start returning again soon. So give him the Villa game, I would say, and then reassess after that. So I won't spend too long on this one, because once that move to Liverpool is confirmed, obviously FPL will price him pretty quickly. But at what price would I consider going for Gakpo? Now, looking at where he's played mostly in the league this season, they've got to list him as a midfielder. I think if they put him as a forward, that won't completely rule him out of contention. But you've already got Darwin Núñez there for 9 million. Obviously, Firmino is a forward as well. We only have 3 spots, so I think that would kind of rule him out as an FPL option, at least straight away. Obviously, never say never. If he does come in as a midfielder, I think 9 million or above would definitely be a wait and see, because I think of the midfielders that I've got outside of Salah, the likes of, you know, Saka and Martinelli and Rashford, a lot of them, obviously all of them are cheaper than 9 million. So to justify going for Gakpo and removing one of those consistent players and finding extra money, I probably wouldn't do that. I think he will come in at 8 to 8.5 million, and I would consider that. But again, it would have to be at a point where the fixtures are so good, I'm convinced by the minutes, and I also want to get rid of one of my midfielders, which I definitely don't want to do right now. If he's less than 8 million, that would then be a consideration straight away, because that is cheap enough to kind of go for the punt. And if you look at the kind of numbers, you know, in recent seasons, and obviously it's with PSV, and this is in the, and I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, I'm almost sure, it's a Eredivisie. Have I got that right? Am I close? Let me know in the comments below. Not that I don't know the league, I just don't say it that often, right? That's all. The numbers are good. Anyway, 0.38 expected goals per 90, 0.54 expected assists. So I think a lot of people are thinking of him as like a goal scorer, but looking at those numbers, in the last couple of seasons at least, he's more of a creator, but also has quite a bit of goal threat as well. So 0.93 expected goal involvement, you can see on the right, is very, very good. So he's got good numbers. So that is why I would consider him a kind of 8 or less. Any more than that, it's not a complete, you know, never go there, but I'd probably want to see a few games for Liverpool first. I'm quite confident that he will get good minutes while Diaz and Jota are out. I could definitely see him, Núñez or Firmino, and then Salah on the right starting quite a few games. But right now, when I look at my team, there's just so many kind of good options that I've already got. You know, Saka, Martinelli, Mount is doing all right, double game week. Salah and Rashford, you know, a lot of people have got Almiron. I wouldn't mind owning him as well. Possibly Foden and De Bruyne. Gakpo comes in at a time when we can just fit, like, I've got 5 midfielders and I could still fit more in. So yeah, I think to go for him straight away, he'd have to be cheap, under 8 million. I think he'll come in at 8 to 8.5, and I will probably just wait and see at that point. All right, so who are the best potential Callum Wilson replacements? Havertz looks decent with the double, and he's the highest goal scorer since Graham Potter took charge. Now, I'll be honest, I've not verified if that is true. We're going to take Ollie at his word. But either way, Havertz did look good against Bournemouth. He got a goal and an assist, and we'll definitely discuss him in a second. I should say that I'm recording this video on Wednesday. It's not going out until Thursday, and the deadline is not until Friday. So we may well hear from some of the managers in press conferences before the deadline. If Eddie Howe is much more positive about Callum Wilson, there might be a case to keep him, especially if you're on like a 3-forward formation and you want to get rid of one of your other forwards to get Mitrovic, for example. But if you're like me and you're thinking about selling him, let's look at the replacements. So this is the list I came up with, but let's be honest, these are most of the players that anyone is going to be considering right now. I mean, Che Adams, Ollie Watkins, they're options as well, but I wouldn't be bringing them into my team right now. Solanke, I'm sure not a lot of you are looking at, but he's just cheap. That's why he's on the list. So Havertz at 7.7. I do quite like him. His underlying numbers are maybe not quite as good as most of the players on this list, but he hasn't always played this season. But that, for me, is part of the problem. Has that performance against Bournemouth convinced you that he's now absolutely nailed on to start all of those games over the next 3 weeks? Because that's when you really want him. You want him for the Forest game in 18, the double game week in 19, and then Palace at home in game week 20. And if we take a look at Chelsea kind of recently, because I've seen a few people saying he just doesn't fancy Aubameyang, which might be true, right? He didn't play the last 2 games for Chelsea in the league, so the game after the World Cup break and the one before. But he did start in game week 15 against Arsenal. He did start in game week 13 against Man United. So it's not guaranteed that he just won't play from now on. So you've got Havertz, and he did start against Bournemouth, but not against Newcastle. He started the 2 games before that, no minutes against Man United. The good thing is about him, he does seem to mostly be getting minutes and mostly starting, at least from about, well, pretty much all season, right? Under kind of Tuchel and then under Potter as well. But I don't think you can kind of guarantee in any way that he's going to go and get 90 minutes every game. He may not need that because obviously, like I said, they do have that double game week. But it's just something to kind of acknowledge. I think if he was benched in any of these games, I don't think you could be completely surprised about it, right? So Havertz is definitely an option. And for those of you that just want to go a little bit punty, you've already got Mitrovic possibly, you just want to target a double game week, I don't mind him whatsoever. The obvious replacement, I would say, is probably Mitrovic. I know people are still going on about the yellow card situation. I think in some ways, because of the double in 19, the yellow card situation just doesn't feel as bad, because if he does get it in game week 18, he'll only miss one of the games in 19. So he'll still play. He won't blank completely. But I guess if he gets a yellow against Southampton, he would miss the Leicester game. So then it'd be Southampton at home, Chelsea, then a run of pretty bad fixtures. But at least when he is fit and available, you know he's going to start every single game. So in the short term, because of the lack of the yellow cards, because of the slightly better fixtures, you could possibly look at Havertz. But I just think, given that you save money, given that the stats are better, given that he's definitely on penalties, and given that he's pretty much nailed to start every single game when he's fit, I just can't see how on paper that Mitrovic is just not a better option than going for Havertz. So it's not to try and put people off. That's just how I'm looking at it right now. I don't mind Martial at all. I think one thing to kind of note with the numbers you see on screen, they're per 90 minutes. I don't think Martial is necessarily going to get 90 minutes that often anytime soon, because obviously he's just back. He's had injury concerns in the past. I think I have to remember who the manager was then. I think Ten Hag said that he was fit and he only took him off because the next game was a few days away. But that's kind of the problem with him, right? You've got to do that. I think given that they got Man City and Arsenal in the next 4, he's a bit too much of a short-term punt for me right now. Again, I don't want to keep talking about Mitrovic, but he just does look like a great option, because people keep saying about what if he doesn't get the yellow card? What if he gets to play Southampton, Leicester, Chelsea next 3 games? I mean, that could be pretty good. But if you look at Martial, he's only 6.7, so he's a good price. Wolves away is going to be tougher than either of the games Man United have in 17 and 19, but they could still get goals. It's just these 2 games here. But what I will say, in kind of favour of Martial, is if he can stay fit, which I know are famous last words, Man United can get goals in these 2 games. And the fixtures afterwards are perfectly fine. Palace at home, Leeds away, Leicester at home, Brentford at home. I mean, that amount of home games in 4 game weeks is pretty nice. So if you're tempted to go for Martial because you know, you think Man United are looking better and you think the next two fixtures are good and you're not too worried about 20 and 21, I still think he's a pretty good long-term pick in terms of fixtures and how many goals Man United might score, but I don't think he's necessarily a good long-term pick in terms of that injury record, which just isn't great. Nketiah, really good option. I think the only thing with him, like the only bad thing about Nketiah is just the other options available. If you go for Martial at Man United, realistically, the only two players you're going to be looking at, I would say, is Rashford and a defender. So if you go for Martial, it doesn't lock you out of doing anything. With Nketiah, you've got literally three great midfielders, Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard. You've got Ben White, Gabriel. You can even maybe go Ramsdale and God. I don't think he's a big issue, but you could. So you've got five other really good players that Nketiah stops you from getting. So it's almost like a domino effect or filling in the kind of blanks. So if you've got 4 slots to fill and you want 3 Arsenal and 1 Fulham, right? You only really want Mitrovic or Andreas Pereira, maybe Willian, who knows if you want to take a punt. Whereas with Arsenal, you could easily have, like I've got, Saka, Martinelli, or Saka and Odegaard, whoever it is, plus a defender, and just have Mitrovic as well. So to me, that's the only bad thing about Nketiah. It's just that there's lots of other good Arsenal options. If you've only got 2 Arsenal players or 1, and you don't want another one anytime soon, go for Nketiah. I would even go for him probably over Martial for long term, just because of that injury kind of concern. But maybe I'm overplaying that. Maybe Martial will just be fine for the next 6 to 7 weeks. Solanke only if you really need a cheap player. I think Bournemouth's fixtures might get a little bit better soon, I think, from what I remember before. Let's take a quick look at them. They've got Palace at home, Man United away, Brentford away, Nottingham Forest at home. They're okay fixtures. They're not amazing, but with Solanke, you get a nailed-on player that gets good minutes and is on penalties as well, that also gives you plenty of money to spend elsewhere. So I wouldn't completely discount him, but honestly, if you've got the money, you should go for pretty much any other player on this list. And I still like Darwin Núñez, but if you're going to go for him, you need to see what that's going to block you doing over the next couple of weeks. What if Brighton get a double game week announced? What if Arsenal do? What if Liverpool do, etc.? I mean, I guess if Liverpool do, then Darwin Núñez becomes a better option, right? But he is 9 million. It does eat up a lot of your funds. And also, what kind of FPL manager are you? Because if you knee-jerk a lot, Darwin Núñez is not for you, because he will go through plenty of games like the one against Villa where he has chances, he just doesn't get them. He'll get a brace, he'll get a hat-trick soon enough, but it's all those kind of games in between as well. So my favourite option is definitely Mitrovic. If you're not worried about Arsenal, maybe Nketiah next, but it really depends. I think I would probably take the punt on Havertz because of the double game week over Nketiah, but it's very close outside of that. I wouldn't, like the yellow card situation, you've got to take it into account, but don't let it completely put you off Mitrovic. If you're selling Wilson this week, who are you going for? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so nice and simple. Should you be holding on to Bruno Fernandes? Now, I would assume for most people that put him in on their Game Week 17 squads, the idea was just to have him for Nottingham Forest at home in Game Week 17, then Wolves away, and then to finish off with Bournemouth at home in Game Week 19 before moving him on. If that was the plan, I think you should probably just stick to it and hope that he can get you something over the next 2 fixtures. I can't really see that much has changed to make you now completely change your mind. There are some situations where you'd maybe want to sell him because if you need money, for example. So just to use a couple of the examples we've already talked about, let's say you had Callum Wilson and you wanted to go up to Darwin Núñez, or you had Reece James and you wanted to go up to Cancelo or Trent or Robertson, someone like that, and you needed cash. Then maybe Fernandes down to a Saka or a Foden or a Mount or whoever, Martinelli, Odegaard, whoever it is, that could work. I still question whether that's worth a hit already in Game Week 18, but possibly that would be a better use of the funds, so you could look at that. Either way, I think after Game Week 19, it's probably worth getting rid of him. He's nearly 10 million. I just don't think he's worth it, especially when Rashford looks like a better option for a lot less money. Obviously, you could have both, but if you've only got one and it's Fernandes, Rashford is probably the go-to if you're going to keep hold of a Man United player for the long term, just because of how good he is value-wise, right? I looked at Bruno Fernandes' numbers, and in 2020-21, his expected assists were 0.33, his expected goals were 0.24. The following season, in 2021-22, the expected goals went up slightly and the expected assists came down. So overall, I wouldn't say even that, because you'd rather have goal threat than kind of assist threat, but whatever, the numbers were kind of similar. But this season, although his expected assists have remained fairly similar at 0.29, his expected goals are down. They've almost halved. It's 0.15. That is pretty poor for an attacker that costs nearly 10 million. Now, we're only talking from an FPL perspective. I think from a Man United point of view, Bruno Fernandes is still extremely important, still one of the best players, but we only care for FPL about their points potential, and that just doesn't look good to me. To put that into perspective, Kieran Trippier, I think, is at 0.25 expected assists. So as a right back, he's almost as threatening at creating chances as Bruno Fernandes' numbers are showing right now. And 0.15 expected goals is the same as Gabriel, the Arsenal defender. Now, I'm not sitting here for 1 minute telling you that Gabriel is going to score as many goals as Fernandes this season. I'd still put my money on Bruno, but it's still a lot of money to kind of take that gamble. So, like I said, if you're someone that had the plan of the first 3 fixtures and then move them on, I don't see that too much has changed. Like, we already knew these numbers before buying him. I don't think too much has changed. You should probably just stick through the plan, roll your transfer this week if you can, and see what you feel like in game week 19. If you need the money, maybe you can get rid of him. But I find it hard to think that most teams need a hit already after we've just had basically a wild card. So it's not looking great for Bruno Fernandes going forward. He still has penalties as far as we know. I know Martial took the last one. I think Bruno will still be on penalties, but even that's not guaranteed. I think the problem was in previous seasons where he was hitting like 190, 200 points. Man United got a lot of penalties, right? And his role was slightly different. He was much closer to goal, and that's just not the case right now. And I'm not saying he was only about penalties. And again, we're only talking from an FPL point of view, but those penalties are not as prominent right now. So nearly 10 million is just too much. But if you've already got him, give him 2 more games and then see. So there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed that one and found it useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I'm not sure if there'll be another video later today, but I'll try and do a final thoughts video on Friday morning because the deadline is 6:15 PM UK time on Friday evening. So we'll have a deadline stream, but I'll try and put out a final thoughts video before that, just to cover any other news from press conferences, any injury updates, and also to cover anything that happens in that Man City Leeds game, because I know that I put the team selection video out before that game, and I've recorded this video before that game, so I'm hoping there's not something major like a Haaland injury or a Cancelo injury that I have to go and re-record stuff. Hopefully it'll be okay, but if there is something major, I'll cover that in the final thoughts video. If there's anything else you want to see, any questions you think I've missed, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.